scripture we used last week. So turn with me to the book of Jonah, chapter 3. And we'll also have it on the screen. I say Jonah chapter 3, and I have Jonah chapter 1 on the screen. Bear with me for a moment, I apologize. I believe it's Jonah chapter 3, and I made a typo. But it says this: Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose, went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. This is continuing from where we were. I apologize. All right. So Jonah arose, went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Now, we talked about in the first week how we talked about Adam and Eve. If you were here, you remember, and how they positioned themselves outside of God's will and God's purpose, and became fearful and shameful of who they were and what they become, because they had positioned themselves outside of His will. Yet God still wanted to bring restoration. And there's always consequences to our disobedience to God. There's always consequences to stepping outside of His will and behaving contrary to how He's instructed us. But He still wanted to bring restoration. Yet Adam and Eve tried to fix it themselves. And the fix that they came up with was inadequate. And we learned that you and I cannot fix ourselves. You and I cannot correct ourselves. You and I can't get it together and then we can come to God. Adam feared God, tried to hide from God, tried to make a fix for himself, thinking, if I can just cover up my shame. Well, we cannot do that. God had to provide the fix. God had to bring restoration, right? So then we talked about last week about following directions. Putting ourselves in a place where we hear the voice of the GPS, where we hear the voice of God speaking to us. And today I went and I was using GPS and I was picking Christian up, thought I was picking some others up today, and I turned the voice of the GPS down to mute. And I ended up taking some wrong turns and had to ask Christian, hey, where do I go from here? Do I do this? Because I turned the voice of the GPS off. I didn't want to hear the voice. So we have to make sure that we're listening to the voice so that we can receive directions, because we can't determine our future by ourselves. We can't determine the right path, the right decisions, how to achieve our destiny, how to be the person God has called us to be without hearing His voice give us direction. And sometimes He speaks very clearly, other times He speaks very subtly. But if we're tuned in and we're listening for His voice, He will speak and He will give us direction. Sometimes it's just take a step, and then we don't do anything else until we hear the voice of the GPS again. Well, today's message is recalculating. Now, how many of you have ever heard a voice of your GPS say, recalculating? Maybe you missed your turn, maybe you weren't paying attention, or whatever the case may be, my GPS will do that. And my wife has the same GPS on her phone as she has if she chooses to use her phone, but she also has a dashboard GPS, and it literally sounds just like that in a woman's voice, but recalculating. So here's what I want to get across. We talked last week about directions. But if you ignore the directions, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get lost. And that's happened to me before. It happened to me this morning. We talked about Jonah. We know that Jonah initially ignored God's direction, and he wound up in the belly of a whale. He wound up in a situation that was miserable for him. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us the specifics of what his experience was in the belly of the whale. We know it was dark, and it gives us vague understanding of what it was like, and we can imagine. But you know what? My imagination kind of goes into overdrive, and I'm thinking it had to have been nasty. Dark, smelly, disgusting. Jonah wasn't the only thing that whale was swallowing. You get my point? I mean, so do I need to get any more graphic? It had to have been nasty in there. And he's there for 3 days, not 3 minutes, not 3 hours, 3 days. Until he finally acknowledges his position in God and that his disobedience, his unwillingness to do what God said to do because he didn't like it, he didn't agree with it, it didn't make sense, it didn't fit in the box of Jonah's understanding of how God should be and how God should work and how God should use him, what God should do in his life. So he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he ended up 3 days in a position that he was never meant to be, in a situation that he should have never been in, all because he didn't listen to directions and wound up getting lost. So you'll never convince me that when Jonah boarded the ship headed in the opposite direction from God, that he figured he'd wind up in a whale. He did just like Adam did. He tried to hide, tried to get away from God. If I run in the opposite direction of God, I won't have to obey. I won't have to listen. I won't have to do this. I'll just go do this. And I'll just ignore it, and then everything will be fine, everything will go away, but I'm not going to go do that. I'm not going to do that. You'll never convince me that he knew he'd end up in the belly of a whale. But when we ignore the directions, see, we feel like we know more than the GPS. And how many times do we feel like we know more than God? Now, if we're just going to be honest this morning, I doubt that there's anybody sitting here right now, and I know it's a small crowd this morning, but I doubt very seriously that there's anybody in here this morning that has ever looked God in the face and said, God, I know more than you. You don't know what you're talking about, God. Right? I doubt any of us have actually been that bold or that disrespectful or that irreverent to God. But our behavior and our actions say, I know more than God. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't fit the narrative of my life and my way of thinking. So I'm not doing that. Right? God, you're not making sense today. But we ignore the directions and we end up in the belly of a whale. We deliberately don't listen to God and we chart our own course instead. We listen and still go another direction because we ignorantly believe we can do better, or we're stubborn enough to choose to do the wrong thing despite his warnings. God gave Adam and Eve a warning. He gave them everything. He was good to them. He blessed them. He took care of them. But he gave them a warning. He gave them instructions. This is one thing that you cannot do. You can do everything else. You can have dominion. You can name everything. You can rule everything, but there's one thing you cannot do. But Adam and Eve, they knew better than God. And then tried to shift blame. And we talked about that. I'm not going to re-preach that message. But Jonah also knew better than God. And here we are today, many times in our own life, and I'm sometimes guilty. I know better than God. That doesn't make sense. There's no way that's going to work. There's no way that fits my life. There's no way I'm taking that risk. There's no way I'm paying that price. There's no way I'm sacrificing that much. That can't be right for my life. My pastor, I still call my pastor, and pastor of my home church in Florida, that was my church before I came to the Midwest. He is serving in the church in Florida for I want to say it's like 21, 22, 23 years, something like that. 23 years. So he'd been talking about ever since he'd been there 20 years, and he wanted to take a sabbatical. He'd never taken a real extended vacation, and he wanted to take an extended amount of time off and just see the country. So he decided, and the church agreed, hey, after this many years of faithful service, he took a month off. And he decided he was just going to take a sabbatical. And he has a motorcycle. And he decided he's just going to ride across country in his motorcycle, see as much of the country as he can see in 30 days. So he set off from Florida, and he's driving throughout the country, and he said, listen, I'm going to be coming, my destination has to be coming right through Omaha. How far is that from you? And obviously not far, so he said, hey, let's meet up. We made plans to get together, and when he was coming through, and we went, we had dinner, him and his brother was with him, and he's driving through, and he decides, let's go get something to eat. I said, all right, where do you want to go? He said, recommend something. I said, well, you know, this is Omaha. Now, between Omaha and Council Bluffs, there's pretty much anything you can name, anything you can imagine. What do you want? You move for steak, Italian, this, that, name all these restaurants. I said, no. I want something I can't get anywhere else. Where do the locals eat? What's good around here? And I said, well, yeah, I really don't know as far as like non-chain restaurants. So let's look it up. So we get our GPSs out, all of us, and we start looking up stuff and places to eat. And we found this one place that said, wow, that really looks good. Had good ratings and reviews and stuff. Let's go there. So we put it in the GPS, we start going, and I know Omaha pretty well. Me and Angel lived there for a while, and we spent a lot of time in Omaha when we were in Nebraska. I know where we're at. This is near downtown. I know the streets. I know where I'm going. And I was convinced that I did. So I turned the GPS off. He said, hey, will you do that? We still got, it says like 1 point some miles. So I said, I know where we're at, and I know there's a lot of one-way streets, construction going on. I know. Well, guess what? We ended up in a place, in a neighborhood where we weren't real comfortable, and we were kind of made to not feel real comfortable because we're driving real slow, and it was kind of obvious that maybe this is not where we want to be. And the restaurant ain't here, and I ain't finding it, and now all of a sudden, I really don't know where we're at. I've never been here. I don't know how to get out of here, so guess what I did? I turned the GPS back on. Who would have thought to just listen to the GPS and just follow the directions that it wanted to give me in the first place? And guess what? We got out of there, we got to where we're going, we got to our destination, had a nice dinner. But I put us in a potential bad situation. Because what did I do? I knew more than the GPS. I know Omaha. I know this area. The GPS, with all its satellites and technology, is not going to be able to predict the construction of the one-way streets. Okay, I knew better, right? Yeah, no. And there was another situation back in 2006 when Angel and I and our family were living in Omaha. We were living in Omaha, and we had been a part of our home church for so long, and my job was taking me potentially to Omaha, and we had to make the decision, do we really want to make this move? Because it was a long-term job. Do we really want to leave Florida and our friends and our family and our wonderful church and our pastor and yada, yada, yada? But we really felt that God was in it, and God had a bigger purpose more than just the job. The job was what was on the surface getting us there, but we really felt like there was something a lot deeper than that. So we felt like this is something we needed to do. And so I talked to my pastor and set up a lunch, and in my spirit, as I began to get closer to the day that I was going to have lunch with my pastor, we were packing the U-Haul, blah, blah, blah. We were moving from Florida. I felt in my spirit, I said, I really feel like we're not going to be back. I mean, this is a kind of a long-term job, but eventually it's going to end and we're going to come back. And I thought, no, that's not going to happen. I really feel like God is up to something here. But I didn't know how to tell my pastor. Because off and on, my pastor and I had been talking about my long-term future at the church. And I thought, well, how do I tell him this? So we have lunch, and I just bring it up, and I said, I just feel like I need to tell you about it. He said, bro, I was feeling the same thing leading up to this message. I feel like God was telling me. He says, I'm not okay with it. I don't want to lose you, but I feel like God is doing something bigger than you and I can see, and I really don't feel like you'll be back. So we go out and we work this job. We get involved in a good church, and we're making relationships, and the job comes to an end. Sooner than what it was supposed to, and the job comes to an end. And so the whole time we had been here 6 months in the Midwest, and we had developed now a burden and a heart for the Midwest. And we used to drive around and we think, boy, this would be a good place for a church. And boy, the Midwest really needs more spirit-filled churches. And people need to come. People need to hear the heart of God and feel the burdens of the Midwest to come to the Midwest. We just didn't want to be those people. We thought God needed to send some people. We just, not these people. And so the job comes to an end abruptly. Okay, what do we do now? And we began to pray about it, wonder, what do we do here? We got to make a decision quick. Money's going to dry up. What do we do? We said, you know what? Just go back to Florida. And yet there was some uneasiness there. We weren't sure that was really the right decision. And the overseer of the Church of God, as many of you know, we were part of a denomination, wanted to reach out to me. He was trying to get a hold of me. And I felt like there was something there because the pastor of the church we were attending, who I was friends with, was long story, was telling me some stuff, that there was a future for me in the region, and the overseer wanted to talk to me, so I wouldn't take his call. I hate to admit that, especially to some people maybe watching this on YouTube, so if Bishop Gospel ever sees this, I apologize. It was rude, it was disobedient, it was stupid. I wouldn't even call him back. He keeps trying to call me, leaving me nice messages. I won't call him back. I decided it's best for us. I got to take care of my family. So there's always work in my hometown of Florida, so we're just going to go back to Florida, and that's why I want to be in. We're just going to go. We're driving out of Omaha on the interstate, and the angel looks at me and says, something doesn't feel right. I really feel like we're supposed to be here. Or I wonder if we're supposed to be here. No, we got to do this. This is the doors have all closed, and this is blah, 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 blah. Never prayed about it, never consulted God, never talked to the overseer. I knew best. I knew what was right. In our situation, I had to handle things, and I knew what was best to do. And I didn't listen to the voice of God, didn't even give him a chance. What I did was turn down the volume and put God on the shelf and say, you stay there till I need you. When I think I need help, I'll consult you. Now, is that what I really said to God? No. But my behavior and my decisions reflected that attitude. So the reason I told you that whole long story is because we went back, we got plugged back in our home church, loving it. Angel goes back to work. We love Florida, all our family's there. On the surface, everything is great. What an incredible church that we get to be a part of, and the church is growing, and I just love my home church so much, and then everything's great, and everything's hunky-dory, but something's not feeling right. And the more time goes on, the more things just aren't feeling right. And I'm working for a company that sends people all over the place. I'm in management, and they send people all over the country. And each cycle that to work in power plants, they say they're going to send me to this place and to that place and that place. And each time it's longer time and it's more money and it's looking good. And each time, at the last minute, they send me to Nebraska. Every time, 5 years in a row. And I'm so frustrated about what in the world is going on, and I'm getting more miserable, and we're really feeling like it's incredible as our home church is, like we're not supposed to be there. And I'm upset at that, because no way, that can't be right. I'm getting closer and closer to what me and my pastor have talked about and coming on staff. This is my dream. This makes sense. This fits in my box. This fits the narrative of my life. This has to be what happens. And finally, there's going to be one last job, one long-term job making a ton of money for a great amount of time. It's really going to set us up to be able to make less money by going into ministry, and boy, this is it. Boy, this is the thing. Last minute, what do? We're sending it to Nebraska. I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm discouraged, I'm angry, everything is wrong. And finally, I take a day off work and say, all right, God, we need to talk. And I'm staying right here, and I'm going to spend the whole day fasting and prayer, whatever I got to do. I'll take another day off. I don't care what it takes. You got to speak to me because I'm miserable. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand why nothing's working out. And he said, because you're running from me and you're not doing what I said. Whoa, God, hold on. That's not what I was wanting to hear. I'm wanting you to fix this and bless me and make everything come together where that's falling apart. And you're telling me I'm the problem. No. That's not what I want to hear. And he speaks to me ever so gently and says, this is where I want you to be. And you'll always be miserable until you obey and do what I've told you to do. And then, long story short, I'm in the Midwest now, right? But the moral to all that story is if everything happened and everything was falling out of place because I knew better. I was making decisions that seemed right on the surface and were good. I was bringing about good for my family. I wanted to serve the kingdom. I wanted to serve my church. I wanted to be a part of what God was doing. But God had different plans. But I knew better. I knew better than God. Well, I ended up in the belly of the whale, and guess where it spit me out? The Midwest, where God wanted me to begin with. Amen? So here I am. And God has blessed Angel and I, and we've fallen in love with Iowa. So God knows best, even when we think we know best. So why do we miss it sometimes, even when we're using a GPS? With all its technology and its pinpoint accuracy, I can turn on my GPS and I can hit this little button that says find me. And it will pull up a location with accuracy within 80 feet. And it will give me an address of where I'm at. And it will pinpoint and find me. But a GPS, with all its accuracy and all of its technology, we still mess up. We still get lost. I did it today. Why? Why is it that we still get lost? Sometimes we miss our turn because we're going too fast for the instructions. You remember King Saul? I don't have time to preach on him today. If not, go back and read about King Saul. Israel wanted a king. They chose for themselves a king. And Saul started out well, but he ended up missing it. He ended up messing up. Because God wasn't moving fast enough for him. And when Samuel the prophet was coming to offer a sacrifice, and the prophet was the only one that was supposed to offer it, Saul stepped into the role of the priest when he was not called to the office of a priest. We got to get this done. The enemy's right there. We got to offer sacrifice so God is with us so we can win this battle. And things are happening. Things are engaging. We have got to make a decision now. We've got to do this now, or the enemy will overtake us. So Samuel is taking too long. He's not here, so I'm going to do it. It's the right thing to do. It's what pleases God. Yeah, I know, and I've been taught. God has warned that only the prophet, only the priest does this, but I'm going to step in and I'm going to do it because it needs to be done. And it was in that moment that Saul stepped out of his destiny, stepped into pride, stepped into a place that mispositioned him out of God's will and purpose for his life. And you know the rest of the story. If you don't, go back and read it. And Saul could have gotten right. God would have redeemed him, but he was too prideful. When God brought correction, he said, no, that's not going to happen. No, I did what I had to do. And he argued instead of getting it right. And it was the beginning of the end for Saul. So we got to understand, even when we think a decision needs to be made in our lives, even when something needs to happen right now, we need to make a decision. We need an answer. We need a miracle. We need something to take place. Never step out and make a decision. Never launch before it's time. Never step out into solving the problem, fixing things, and making something happen before it's time. Before God speaks. Before you hear the voice of the GPS. Don't get moving so fast that the GPS can't talk to you quick enough. David waited on his appointed time. The one who replaced King Saul. He waited on his appointed time. Even though he was already anointed to be king of Israel, he still went right back to tending sheep. He went right back to following the instructions of his father. He went right back to being a nobody. He went right back because he was waiting patiently on God to set him in the place of his destiny. He had already been spoken to by the prophet. It had already been made known that he would be king. He was already anointed to be king. So what did he do? He marched into Jerusalem and he declared, I'm the new king. Make way for the new king. The prophet is declaring king. Samuel, get over here and tell them what you told me. No, because Samuel told him, wait. Keep it private, keep it silent, and wait. Wait for the right time. And David did that. David was patient, waited on God, even while he watched the kingdom falling apart, while he watched the country going in the wrong direction. He sat back and saw things happening that never should have happened. Saul was leading the people of God away from the heart of God. And he could have stepped in and said, no, this is not going to happen. But he waited for his time. And in an act of obedience, where he thought he was just following the instructions of the Father, just delivering some meals, He showed up and God set him into his destiny because of an act of obedience. And he waited on God. And in the midst of his obedience, the voice of God came to him and said, this is your time. This is your moment. Step in. Take this giant. And God set him up that day. So it's important to let your anointing override your appointing. What does that mean? In other words, what you're called to do, what God has given you in this moment, where God has placed you, what God has spoken to you in this moment, let that be more important than getting there. I've got to get to the end. I've got to achieve this result. I've got to have this happen in my life. No, do what God has called you to do right in the moment. What He's given you, what He's placed in your hands, use it. Be faithful right where He's called you. And in the right moment, in the right time, He will catapult you into your destiny and do what you can never make happen on your own. Time is so crucial to God. And yet we make time so important. We think, I have no time. I've got to have this happen. This has got to take place in my life. I've got to do this. I've got to have this. This has got to be changed. This has got to be fixed. I don't have time. But time is crucial to God. And timing is everything. Allow God in His perfection, in His sovereignty, to decide the right time to do the right thing in your life. Amen? Because if we decide that we're in charge of the timing, we're going to end up in the belly of the whale. We're going to end up not hearing the voice of the GPS, and we'll get lost. If you turn too early, you'll be in a neighborhood you don't want to be in. Wait on God. As a sheep that's following the shepherd, with Jesus being the shepherd, if you turn too quick, if you wander off, if you think you know better, you're going to end up in a place where you find yourself alone, lost, scared, feared, doubtful, hearing voices you don't want to hear, hearing confusion, voices you don't know what they are and where they are, and you find yourself in a place where you've made yourself vulnerable to an attack of the enemy because you've veered off. Thankfully, in that moment, you can cry out and the shepherd will come and rescue you. But why put yourself in that situation to begin with? Why not just listen to the voice of the GPS and follow the instructions? Some people burn out because they've used up all their fuel on launch and have nothing left for the long haul. So don't start out a hero and wind up a zero. And what do I mean by that? I see so many people. I've seen a lot of people in my time in the church and in ministry and serving God that, man, they get saved and they love God and they're going to give God everything. Everything's right. All that is exactly right. I'm going to live for God. I'm going to do everything I can. But then they start learning God. They start learning the Word. They start growing a little bit. And suddenly, now I know more than God. And I'm going to start making decisions for myself. And plus, God isn't moving fast enough for me. Things aren't happening the way I want them to, when I want them to. So I'm going to do what I need to do. And then in the long haul, they don't finish well. We see people backslide or just become pew sitters or whatever the case may be. Why? Because we don't listen to the voice of God. Or we get too busy with other things to pay attention to the instructions. Jonah was so busy being mad at God's mercy, he couldn't see what God was about to do. He couldn't see that God was about to bring a people into His own. That God was about to redeem a whole entire people. He couldn't see that because he was too mad disagreeing with God. Right? That he couldn't see the big picture that God had something amazing in store. And that His name would go down in history. You think that Jonah knew that he'd be talked about 3,000 or 4,000 years later? That he would be hailed a hero because of what he did? That he would be hailed as someone that was obedient to God and accomplished great things for God? No, he was just too busy being mad because he didn't agree with what God was saying. We get too busy sometimes. Sometimes in heavy traffic, I miss turns because I take my eyes off the road and I don't catch the instructions. Right? Signs telling me you need to turn here, or there's your exit, or I know that I need to turn off and catch state highway this or whatever, and there's signs telling me, and there's things telling me I need to do it, but I don't see the signs, and I don't notice the ways that God is trying to speak to me because I'm too busy with everything else. Right? And God does speak to us. Sometimes it's not always the voice of God. Right? Sometimes it's not even always the still, small voice. Many times that's how God speaks to us, but sometimes it isn't even that. That little subtle, still, small voice that Elijah talked about. That we just hear the voice of God and we know it's Him. Sometimes God speaks to us through a need. Sometimes God speaks to us through a circumstance. Sometimes God speaks to us through timing. And we just know, we know in our spirit, the Holy Spirit rises up within us and we know this is what God wants from you. And when there's no confusion involved, there's no worry, there's no doubt, there's no fear, there's just peace because we know it's God. Right? There's things that tell us, if we're listening, God will use people. Someone comes to us and speaks a word over. Someone comes and speaks something that's a confirmation of what we've already felt in our spirit. God will speak to us if we're listening. But if we get distracted and we're too busy to listen, we'll miss our turn. And we'll end up lost and confused and afraid. Sometimes it's because the instructions didn't match what you saw. We hear from God, we know what God wants for our life. But then the circumstances of our life and things that go on and things that happen, it doesn't match what God spoke to me. God showed me this and God spoke this to me and God put this in my heart, but what I'm seeing doesn't match. So I've got to do something. I've got to change. I've got to run. I've got to hide. I've got to fix. I've got to do. And we take it upon ourselves because what we're seeing doesn't match what we've heard. Instead of running in and asking the GPS, am I still on track? Do I need to turn? What's the last thing you said to me? No. We don't consult the voice of God, God's positioning system. We just see that things don't make sense, so we've got to fix it. Many times, when I'm going on long trips, I have to find places to pull off and look and listen to the instructions so it would make sense to me. And sometimes, no matter how much of a hurry I'm in, sometimes no matter how bad I just want to get to my destination and be done with it, I just have to stop. I have to take the time to stop, study the instructions, make sure I understand, and make sure I'm still going the wrong way. Sometimes we just need to stop and listen. Sometimes we just need to put everything aside, refocus on God, and make hearing His voice the priority, the only thing we're going to do. I need to hear the voice of God and make sure I'm still doing what He said. Or what is the last thing He said to me? Am I still on track? Sometimes it never made sense, but I trusted the GPS because I didn't know where I was. And we're moving on quickly. One of the features of my GPS is the recalculation feature. And recalculation is inevitable in any long journey. Sometimes you just get mispositioned. Sometimes you just get a little off course and you have to be recalculated. My GPS has a voice that's pretty pleasant. The thing I like about my GPS is when I make a wrong turn, she doesn't say, as I've joked in the past, she doesn't say, "Hey, stupid, why did you do that? Did you not hear what I said? Turn left, not right, you moron."